Hey everyone, this is Kelly Scott Reed, a word with Kelly Scott Reed from Rough Press. We are speaking today with Katy Naylor, the incomparable Katy Naylor. Hi, Katy.
Hi. Well, I mean, after an introduction like that, what can I say? Yes, I'm Katy Naylor. I live in the UK, as you can hear from my accent, by the sea. I write poetry, prose, computer games. I edit my own little mag as well. Um, I love your mag and everything it does, and I'm here today. So hi.
Hi, and please tell us a little bit more. Just plug your mag a little bit because that's really important. It's really
Oh,
interesting, good, and different, and people need to know about it. Go ahead and plug that a little bit
amazing.
more.
Okay, so my mag is called Void Space Zine, and you can find it on Twitter. It's at underscore void space underscore zine. And it's a mag dedicated to interactive literature. So where this started, I grew up playing text adventure games, and like they were the things that you played in the 80s, and then as like the 90s and the 2000s rolled around, they got a bit of a sort of renaissance, and it sort of became interactive fiction was the sort of new phrase, and it tended to be stuff that wasn't just crawling around a dungeon or trying to pretend to be an alien. It became like a way of became a lot more accessible, the programming to do it, and it allowed a lot of diverse voices and a lot of very interesting narratives developed. And last year, about November, I thought, I've written a few myself. I've had them published in the Bear Creek Gazette, and I was thinking, I'd love to read more of these interactive narratives, and there must be a mag out there somewhere that focuses on them. And it turned out that there wasn't. Um, there used to be one, I think, called Q10, but it's no longer with us. And so I decided to start one. So Void Space Theme, it's a place for your kind of computer gamey interactive fictions, but it's wider than that. So we've had interactive poetry, we've had interactive memoir, um, and what is so great about it is that it's a really niche brief, right? So people often end up sort of thinking how they can meet it and writing something bespoke. And we're getting people thinking about uh, writing in different ways, giving the reader agency in different ways. And yeah, I think it's something really exciting that we've started here.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And really check it out. It's so different and cool. It's beyond cool. So, first question, what was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I grew up in a house full of books. My family are all teachers. Like we had a really little house growing up, but it was like one of the bedrooms was just like a library. So I was always surrounded by language. I didn't really think anything of it. But I remember one night when I must have been what, 13 maybe, and so cheesy. I read 1984 by George Orwell for the first time, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember not just not being able to go to bed, just staying up all night and reading it cover to cover. And at that kind of impressionable age, it's a really powerful thing, and the idea, seeing like the way the book was written, but also um, the way that in the book language is used as a political tool and as a way of
Mm-hmm.
controlling expression and thought. And yeah, that really got me thinking. So
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that because we're in a time right now in our country where people are trying to silence books in a lot of ways, um, keeping the political voice out of literature and out of the hands of children. And I was talking to my husband about, well, 1984 is one of them. Oh gosh, I was a big Stephen King fan because I was a little kid and I was like, oh, horror thing. And I was reading it at like 9 years old. That's a subversive thing to do, like to go to the library and like you're buying cigarettes or alcohol underage and like being so nervous that the librarian is not going to let you take that book out. There was a subversiveness to literature that I found really attractive. Like it was always undercutting authority, which is what I really love. So when you were talking about 1984, that was one of the books where I thought, ooh, there's another way to look at this. So that's very cool. Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't want to go on about myself, but when I meet
No,
people and I
it's really
relate to them,
interesting.
I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I think that's really interesting what you're saying about literature being something that has the power to be subversive. And I think the interesting thing about censorship, I mean, obviously the kind of recent stuff is it's not good. Banning books is not good. You kind of hope that people will always find a way of getting their hands on the books that they're told that you don't want them to read.
Well, they're
Um,
doing that now. They're like, there's all these people just purchasing these books and sending them to the school.
oh, I love it. I
Like,
love
oh
it.
yeah, well, we're gonna give them all to your kids. We're gonna send it to them anyway. So it is
That is
kind of
great.
interesting. Um, so what is your writing kryptonite?
Ooh, my writing kryptonite. That is a really good question. Um, so like the thing that would kill my writing stone dead?
Not necessarily stone dead, but something that gets in the way of your of your um of your productivity or your creativity. Something that
Okay.
stifles that.
Okay, that's so interesting. So I have got two answers for that. The first is kind of in terms of mechanics. If you sit me down in front of a laptop and tell me you have to sit down and write 1,000 words, I will get nothing done because I don't know. I think it might be my dyspraxia. I have the kind of flitty attention nap thing going on. So I
Mhm.
find that I do most of my writing in my notes app on my phone. And it's great because it's low pressure. I don't feel like, oh, I have to write. I'm just tapping away with my thumbs. It's quick, it's easy. My fingers aren't getting all stuffed up. Um, and yeah, and it's something I can do in kind of bite-sized pieces. In terms of kind of more psychologically, um, I'm really, I think the problem sometimes is that the more lit mags you read and the more immersed you get in the kind of world of indie lit or net lit or whatever you want to call it, it's really tempting to start looking at what people publish and whether consciously or subconsciously kind of melding your writing to maybe fit that better. So, like, everybody wants an audience, everybody wants a voice, um, everybody wants to get published. And I think, sometimes I'll find myself reading a poem in a big journal and kind of, oh, I see what they've done. They've started with a big statement and then they've done the thing where they've made it personal and then they've made it all wibbly wobbly metaphysical. And I'm like, well, I could probably do that. But then when I find myself trying to write to brief almost, then that kind of makes my writing a lot less interesting. So it's trying to clear my mind of those sort of expectations and and it means that, um, certainly with short stories, I don't write very many of them. I'll write one every now and again, but it has to be because there's something that makes me want to write it.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand that. That's jokingly how I write. If someone we we were at where we work, we get a lot of wacky names, like names that are very different, like, and they'll send these names around, and then the name will inspire me to write something, a story about that name. And that's the only way I can write. Otherwise, I'm not inspired. Like you have to just throw me a cue and I will write. It's kind of I have attention deficit that
Right.
so it's very hard for me to sit and just write. I have to be inspired.
Mm, mm. Well,
Um,
I find I do that there's lots of little prompt hashtags around floating around on Twitter, and I actually do one every day, partly
oh,
to um, squish on the head the idea of, oh, I need to write something every day, otherwise I am a bad writer. So I'm like, okay, I've written my tweet-sized bit of whatever. There we go. That is my official writing done for the day. Now I don't have to worry about it. It takes the pressure off.
oh,
Um,
that's a good idea.
but also, I mean, that's another thing, isn't it? It's like the pressure that we put ourselves under, I think, can be the biggest killer of creativity. Like the curse of productivity, I think it's a really, we're living a capitalist capitalist society, and there's this
Yeah.
idea, and I think it's partly tied into the writing to brief thing, this idea that everything we do has to be productive. So if I'm going to be a writer, I have to be working towards publication, I have to be working towards, selling books or getting paid or getting followers or getting whatever. And I think
Mhm.
it's such a soul deadening thing to be trapped in if you're not careful.
Mhm.
So one thing I do, weirdly struck that off, is do a daily little prompt, and like someone else gives you a word every day. And I have a whole little folder of little scribbles that I've put, and they'll often spark something at a later date. But keeps it fluid.
Oh, that's great little advice for me. Thank you
Yeah,
for me.
yeah, no,
Thank you for
no, no. It's
counseling me
I
Let me
really
today.
just
recommend it.
say, let me just interrupt for a second, Katie. I
Sure.
read your prompt tweets every day because I follow
Oh.
you, as you know, and they're fantastic. And I often think to myself, like, how does she do this? How does she come up with? I think since I started the press, I've done one. I've done one. And then I finished it with, did I do this right? Because I did not know if I did this right. But I did just want to jump in there and tell you that they are fantastic. And I'm always in awe and always impressed at your ability to be so consistent with that.
Oh, thank you. I just tend to look at it first thing in the morning and then just think like I'm naturally a very contrarian person. Like, how can I create the most contrary take on this word possible and put it in something? That's a little tip for you.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, so if you didn't write, what would you do to express your creativity? Or what do you do to express your creativity?
That's a really interesting question. So, for years and years and years, I would have said to you, I am not a creative person. That is not the box that I go into. Um, I've always had hobbies. So for like 10 years, 15 years, I did historical reenactment where like Ren fairs in the States,
Oh yeah.
but kind of more like focused on a particular historical period. So like I handmade my own costumes and I learned how to fight with a spear and how to make butter and that kind of thing, and went off camping,
Oh, that's
over the
cool.
summer. So that was like my 20s. And then after that, like I subsumed any creative drive in other, like I've got a lot of creative friends, and I think I was just, I'm a big fangirl of all sorts of different things. And yeah, I guess my energy just went into that for a long time. Like I'm the kind of person that, I'm not just going to get into a band. I'm going to follow them around the country. I'm going to get the tattoo. I'm not just going to get into a theatre show. I'm going to go like 50 times, and write. Actually, my first sort of writing was, I guess you'd call it fanfic. So I discovered Punch Drunk. They're like an immersive theatre company. So rather than sitting in a theatre and watching a play on stage, there's like they fill these big warehouses with really detailed sets, and you're like in the play and you can walk around and explore stuff.
Very
It's
cool.
really cool. So it came to London, and I went like an undisclosed number of times. And probably my first writing that I thought of as like writing was writing little recaps of stuff that I'd seen for my friends, and um, so really seeing myself as a creative person with a sort of creative thing to fill is quite recent. Don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That was
Okay.
really interesting. Everything you're saying is riveting. I'm just sitting here staring at you going, this is really interesting. Thank you
Oh,
for
cool.
that wonderful answer. And what is the most difficult part of your process, your writing
Most
process?
difficult part of my process. That's a
You
really
kind
good
of answered it a
question.
little bit. I don't want to assume it's the
No,
but go ahead.
no. I guess just consistency. Um, Probably. Like there's a long form thing, whether it's going to be a novella or a book or I don't know what that I want to do. And yeah, I really struggle with just sitting down for the time that you need to actually do that. So even though like I found ways around it, as I said before, with the whole phone thing, and that works really well for poetry and for short work.
Mhm.
Um, but like there's sort of goals I have for myself. I want to get better at dialogue. I want to, you know, maybe expand beyond just Flash and kind of really work on how to develop, you know, well-rounded characters and that kind of thing. And that takes a bit more focus.
Absolutely. On our surprise, I do have a little surprise question,
Okay.
even though these may have all been surprises. What do you find makes you feel free? I know it sounds like a weird question. It's more of a thought, like something in your life that makes you feel like you are free.
I don't feel that very often, to be honest with you. But I guess when it's a warm evening and I've finished my day job and the kids are in bed and the dad's listening out for them, so I'm kind of off duty, just being able to go for a long walk along the beach. And like when the tide's right out and you can just walk on the sand and paddle in the cold water and like lose feeling in my feet. That's probably the most free I feel.
So those feet of clay no longer feel like feet of clay. They're just like, you can't feel them at all.
Yeah. I'm on my way to being a mermaid or something. Yeah.
That's incredible.
No, I don't know. Nonsense.
No, that's exactly, we talk about that a lot. Yeah, I have a similar, I like to be out in nature. And also unencumbered by obligation. I mean, obligation is wonderful. Our children, our family is a wonderful thing, our friends. But sometimes that autonomy of just like, I don't have to answer to anyone. I don't have to be at anyone's beck and call, even though I love them, even though they're there. It's nice to be just you and the sea. I think it's wonderful that you live by water like that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That
Well,
must be wonderful.
we didn't used to. We used to live in London. And then we went to Australia for a couple of years. And it didn't work out, so we had to come back to England. But we decided that if we were going to have to come back for reasons outside of our control, then we were going to really be mindful of the life that we wanted and the compromises that we wanted to make. And for us, I think being out of the city and being by the sea, even though it makes some things, like we both still work in London, so it makes some things more difficult. But yeah, I think it's really good sometimes to have that chance to really think about what you want.
So Katy, is there anything you're working on right now that you'd like to plug besides your interactive blog? Was there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that.
Yay!
I'll explain. I had this with me because I thought in case you asked me anything about my book, I'd have it to hand and I'd be able to look it up. But yeah, so my first chapbook, Postcards from Ragnarok, you may have seen these lovely ladies reviewing it as part of their book club. But it's my book of Viking, but not really Viking poetry, about mythology and the end of the world and everything the turmoil that's inside us. So I could talk about this forever, but basically the idea behind it is that I got really into Norse mythology at uni. I like did the language and all that stuff, and I'm reading these poems and realizing that actually like the images are really strong and really outlandish, but people told these stories, you know, to relate to the world and to things that frighten them. And that's a lot of what we do today in poetry and in literature. So I tried to write poems that really connected the two and sort of pull off the magic trick of teaching you about the mythology through the emotion, but also expressing the emotion through the mythology and kind of trying to pull off both at once. So yeah, sorry, this is probably a bit of an overlong answer.
No,
but
it's
yeah,
great.
it's still on sale from Amazon Postcards from Ragnarok. And if you want to find me on Twitter at Void Scrawl with a K, you can send me a message, and I've still got a load which I could sign and do a little wax seal in, anything you like.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Oh my gosh, Katy, you have been so much fun. Thank you so much. You're going to be probably our first person that we're putting out. So you will be the first. We will let you know when we're doing some editing and stuff along those lines, but we're very excited and we're so pleased that we've got to have this kind of in-depth talk with you, but also that we've got to review your book, and there's something about you that's really inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Ho-
you. I really
We'll talk
appreciate it.
soon. We'll talk
Yeah,
soon though. We should
definitely.
do something like a cocktail hour or
Oh
something.
my God, I would so be up for that. That'd be amazing. Seriously, like I'm assuming we're kind of off the, like, with, yeah.